What is up, everybody? This is Erik, the one and only Bear Collector, and today we're going to be discussing some games for the NES that were best to be deserved, but however, the movie based on the game was actually really good. And of course, I am talking about the Back to the Future video games for the NES. Talking about Back to the Future and Back to the Future Part 2 and 3. Now, as you can see right here, I have my little setup right here with the DeLorean. Put these guys right there for a moment so I can show you the toys first. This is a Playmobil set that my son had that he didn't want no more. And I kept it because I thought it was so cool. And as you can see right there, we got the DeLorean. It lights up. And as you can see, the flux capacitor right there. Pretty neat. This is such a cool car right here, the DeLorean. Awesome model. And of course we got Marty McFly with the camera, which this recreates the scene in the movie where Marty McFly is actually testing out the DeLorean, as well as showing off that he needed to give the plutonium to the I forgot who they were, man. My brain is out. But they were going to give the plutonium. They were trying to take the plutonium back, actually, because, Doc was using it to power up the DeLorean. So, yeah, there goes Doc with his little suit when he was testing it out. And, of course, it wouldn't be complete without the little homie Einstein. His tail, yeah, let's put his tail up. Einstein. Yeah, there you go. And, of course, his plutonium right here, and of course items that come extra plutonium, some more items for the set. But this is not what we're talking about. We're talking about the games right here, Back to the Future and Back to the Future Part 2 and 3. Now, Back to the Future came out back in 1989, and Back to the Future Part 2 and 3 came out in 1990. First, we're going to talk about Back to the Future, the original one. As I said, it came out back in 1989, and it was made by our favorite beautiful company, LJN, and it's loosely based on the first part of the movie series where Marty has to go change the history from his parents, take his mom Lorraine to the dance, and avoid Biff, the mishaps with Biff, as well as have his dad George stand up to himself from the bullies. And basically that's what the game is kind of loosely about. Also at the same time, Marty gets trapped with the DeLorean back in 1955, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong on the dates. But in the early 1950s or mid 1950s, and of course he has to take his mom to the dance, but the game is not quite like the movie. Basically, the game is mostly an overhead action style of game, kind of similar to Paperboy. They compare it, where you're trying to collect clocks in order. So at the bottom of the screen, you have a picture of your brother and sister and yourself, and actually serves as a time reference. If it disappears, like in the movie, the picture, the images, the game is over. So he's trying to collect little clocks and items to keep himself from disappearing and losing the game. Now, by the time when you reach the end of part of this game, you will have like an overhead driving sequence where you're trying to get the DeLorean up to 88 miles an hour to be able to go back home. Back through time. So yes, now there is sequences where you're in a malt shop and you throw milkshakes to collect hearts or something, but it's kind of like bonus games. To be honest with you, I actually think it's not a bad game. This is a game that was very fun from when I was a kid. It's not a bad game. However, it's just very difficult. And the music, they have two songs. One of them is The Power of Love, and I think the other one is Johnny Be Good. They split up the songs, but mostly you'll hear the remake of The Power of Love, but I don't feel like it sounds anything like it, and it's very annoying. So that was one of the things about the game. Now they've done mod hacks to make it more tolerant and more and more up to speed with the song to make it sound more similar. But I played them and I think they were kind of meh. I think the game, I don't think this is as bad as what I'm gonna talk about that one next. But overall, it's a fun memory of my past. And I used to have fun playing it. I remember this game was advertised so much. There were commercials for this game where they showed the part where you're going through the levels, the DeLorean scene, and the ice cream shop scene, the shakes part, and all of that. But yeah, all in all, it's okay, I guess. But let's talk about the next one. So in 1990, they made Back to the Future Part 2 and 3. Now, for different consoles, also made by LJN, our beautiful company. And I believe Acclaim had something to do with the game as well. But now, Back to the Future Part 2 and 3 is kind of unique because for different consoles, the games are a little different than what it is for this one. All the other ones are similar as a side-scrolling style game. I want to say, yeah, I do actually have the Sega Master System version of Back to the Future Part 3, but I don't have Part 2. And it's a little bit more difficult. It's annoyingly difficult, but I'm going to focus more on the NES version of it. Now, this one is basically based on the movies as well. Part 2 based on the movie of Back to the Future Part 2, where Marty has to go to the future to avoid a catastrophe that he needs to help himself out in the future, but then stumbles on an almanac where Biff, old version Biff, discovers it and sends it to his younger self and screws up the timeline. So Marty's out to get the almanac, make sure that the events don't happen, and help his situation in the future. And part 3 it takes place right after the movie where Doc gets trapped in the 1800s in the Old West, and Marty has to go back and help him out to bring him home. Now, the game is a side-scrolling platformer. It's unlike that one. This one's more of a 2D side-scrolling platformer, very Mario-esque style. But both games are very similar. Basically, what you need to do is collect certain items that you need to take. Well, in part 2, you collect certain items that you take back to different time periods, either the present, past, or future. And you have to scramble like the letters to know what the item is in order to put it in its proper place. And in order to get those items, you enter rooms where you play these little mini games where you're able to gain these items. Also, you need to find the remote control for the DeLorean so you could travel between times. So yeah, the game's a little mediocre. It's not bad. I actually think let's go into part 3 before I give my opinion. Part 3 is pretty much the same, but it takes place in the Old West. You don't do the DeLorean scene where you travel to different places in time. You just stick around in the Old West, but you still have to collect those items and do the same thing as in part 2. However, I feel like the Old West version of it is more fixated in one location. And all in all, there is a cheat that you can use to skip to part 3 of the game. But that's one of the major complaints about this game, was that there was no password or save feature to save your area, because it gets really, really crazy. And I would strongly suggest that you guys play this one in an emulator, because you will lose a lot and it's really tricky. Now, what do I think of the entire game series of Back to the Future? It's there. I like them all, but all in all, there is a Telltale series, Back to the Future game for the PS3 that actually is based on a new story that takes place right after Back to the Future Part 3, which is really, really good. And that one is a point-and-click adventure game. that's a story for another day. That one's awesome, but all in all, sticking to these, seeing that other game, I think they're not as great as that other game. But for what we had during the time, I think it wasn't that bad. I think they were okay. I think you'll enjoy them if you play them in emulators and use cheats, because the games are very, very, very difficult. But all in all, I love Back to the Future. It's like one of my favorite movies of all time. And to me, it is just a nice little thing to own, even though it's LJN, and it's great. And one of the cool things is that not only do I have this set as the Playmobil set, I also have the Back to the Future DeLorean, which if I ever decide to do a review of the Telltale one for Back to the Future, I may bring that one as the prop to show you guys. But all in all, it's a great it's not great. It's a product of its past, and it's good to have. Anyways, hope you guys enjoy the gameplay footage of the game. I tried my best for part 2 to get some items, but unfortunately I couldn't. But I did in part 3, so then you guys can see how that works. But anyways, this has been Erik, the one and only Bear Collector. Hope you guys enjoy the gameplay footage of the game. Hope you guys enjoy this review. Please like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe to my family, Lily, a simple mom, Logan from Logan's Toy Box Review, and Alexis from Lexi's Toy Box Review. All of their links are going to be in the description below. And I'll see you guys in the next one. You guys take care. Peace out.